What's going on, guys? Welcome back. I know it's been a while since I've recorded a video for this channel that isn't just a live stream or one-off LEGO review, and that's because, well, let's just say, the first semester of university year 2 was rough, and I've had no time to make videos at all, which is why I'm so happy to finally be on my Christmas break so I can talk about whatever I missed out on talking about over the past few months in the world of film and television and whatever it may be. Of course, I can't break tradition, so I'm going to be bringing you my 3 end-of-the-year lists, beginning with my top 5 favorite musical scores of the year. I began this tradition back in 2022, and I haven't broken it yet, so without further ado, allow me to give you my honorable mentions before we begin the list. Beginning my honorable mentions is the score for LEGO Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy Pieces of the Past. Some of you may be wondering why this is on my honorable mentions list. The music from a little LEGO Star Wars show? What's so special about that? We've had plenty of those over the years. Well, it's because my man Michael Kramer has not skipped a beat since he composed the score for Ninjago Masters of Spinjitzu alongside Jay Vincent. The way that he revived these classic Star Wars pieces of music and interwove them with themes that only the hardcore will recognize, like Cal Kestis's leitmotif when he makes a brief cameo appearance, or using themes from Solo: A Star Wars Story, composed by John Powell. I'm sure there are some that I'm forgetting, but it was simply music to my ears, quite literally, and almost an auditory form of fan service that I can't help but appreciate, being the ultra music nerd that I am. And my second honorable mention is Alexandre Desplat's score for Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. Now, I really like Desplat's work, don't get me wrong. I mean, he composed the music for Rise of the Guardians and Deathly Hallows, for crying out loud. But over the past few years, I feel like he's kind of been on cruise control, especially with the scores he's composed for Wes Anderson's recent films, which kind of blend together for me. But this is one of his more notable works in recent years, if you ask me. His stylings perfectly suit the time period and the gothic nature of the story, perfectly enhancing the material that Del Toro brought to life on the screen. My last honorable mention is the score for Thunderbolts, and I'm just as surprised as you are that this made it into the honorable mentions category, because the MCU scores over the past few years haven't been that memorable, in my opinion, but this is the first one in a while that actually kind of stuck out to me. My biggest issue with it, similar to my gripes with the score for Captain America: Brave New World, is that these composers are just kind of disregarding the pre-established musical continuity of the franchise, especially when it comes to these Captain America-adjacent characters like John Walker, Bucky Barnes, or Sam Wilson himself. But aside from that, this score brought something new to the table that I haven't heard from a Marvel movie. It may be the presence of Sun Lux, the band who composed the music for Everything Everywhere All at Once, which was nominated for an Oscar, so they're no joke. And although they do throw out some of the work of other composers like Henry Jackman, they do tie it together in a few interesting ways. What I'm thinking of mainly is at the very end of the film, when the new Thunderbolts theme leads into a tiny bit of Alan Silvestri's Avengers motif once the Thunderbolts are declared the new Avengers. I think that's kind of neat as a way of linking new characters to the old through music. But finally, moving on from my honorable mentions, bringing us into the list at number 5, I have the score for Wicked for Good, which was even more noteworthy to me than the score for Wicked from last year, and that's because John Powell had a much harder job this time around. He had to retain the musical continuity of Part 1 without being able to pull from the same well of iconic songs that he was able to last time. That's a problem I don't think Stephen Schwartz encountered while writing the music for the original musical, but it's something that inevitably comes with this form of adaptation. And I think that Powell found a pretty clever workaround by giving us subtle reprisals of some of the most iconic songs from Part 1 as leitmotifs over the course of this film, namely Defying Gravity, Popular, and even What Is This Feeling at a few points. This seamlessly links this film to its predecessor in a musical sense, truly making it feel like a cohesive cinematic experience, which I'm pretty sure was the intent of Powell and Schwartz while writing the music for this film. Moving on to number 4, I have the score for Sinners. Now, I'll admit right out of the gate, I am not as religiously obsessed with this film as some people are, nor have I listened to the soundtrack as many times as any of the others on this list, but Ludwig Göransson has struck again. This film, and by extension its soundtrack, has had such a massive cultural impact that I would be remiss not to include it on this list. I would not be surprised if this got Ludwig nominated or even results in him winning another Oscar, because it's that good. Not only does he bring variety to so many classic songs over the course of this film, but he straight up genre flips at multiple points. The more classical sounding acoustic strings in the first half of the film are sharply contrasted by the aggressive electric guitar once we enter the second half of the film and the vampires are causing chaos and death every way they turn. As previously stated, I am not as into this movie and its music as some people are, but I simply can't deny it's fucking awesome. Bringing us into the top 3 is the score for Superman. Here's the thing, you guys. As much as I really like Hans Zimmer's theme for Superman, John Williams' Superman theme is really the quintessential musical representation of this character. Which is why I'm so happy that the composers for the new Superman film, David Fleming and John Murphy, did not shy away from reviving Williams' iconic theme, or at least certain elements of it. There's a video by Robert Rodriguez Music on YouTube that I watched recently, which elaborates on this in an even better way than I will be able to do in the limited time that I have for this video. But I didn't like the electric guitar rendition of the Superman theme that was used in the trailer for this film. I thought it sounded kind of cringe, like they were trying to be too modernistic and cool in a way that felt unnatural and cynical in a certain sense, but the way that the music is used in the film couldn't be further from that. I actually liked the electric guitar that was used throughout the film, especially in the music for the villains. Lex Luthor and his cronies have some pretty cool themes used to represent them. Even the new Justice Gang have a fun leitmotif, and as is par for the course with James Gunn films, we've got some awesome song choices. The main examples in this case are 5 Years' Time and Punk Rocker by Iggy Pop being used as a way to close out this movie. But it all comes back to Murphy and Fleming using John Williams' theme in all of its epic glory to inspire hope in a way that this character was always meant to. And coming in at number 2, I have the score for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, one that I was a bit skeptical of before the film's release, and that's because just a few weeks before The Final Reckoning hit theaters, I found out the score would not be composed by Lorne Balfe. And that worried me, because of the magnificent tapestry he had woven with his scores for Fallout and Dead Reckoning. Instead, his 2 pupils, Max Arouge and Alfie Godfrey, took over the reins for this final installment in the franchise. And most of my concerns were assuaged when I finally saw the film and heard their score, because it delivers mostly everything I wanted out of a bombastic finale to this 8-film series. Although, I do believe it is a slight step down from Balf's work on the prior 2 installments. My biggest point of praise for this score is how almost understated it feels considering the scale of the film. For a 3-hour action epic, the music is more emotional and subdued than I ever expected it to be, bringing an ethereal quality to these classic Mission Impossible themes we've come to know and love over the course of the series. The plot motif is back in full force, of course the iconic Mission Impossible theme. Even the Entities theme is used to chilling effect in some of the film's best sequences. Although I do wish they had carried over Grace's theme from Dead Reckoning, considering it was one of the highlights of that score for me, but unfortunately it's completely absent here, one of the few cases where they failed to maintain the musical continuity established by Balfe in the 2 prior installments. But that criticism means nothing when it comes to the musical highs of this score. The way they combined the score and diegetic sound in the now iconic submarine sequence, the track titled Firefight, which underscores the fight scene intercutting between Ethan and his team. One of the most brilliantly suspenseful pieces of music I've listened to all year, yet I find it strangely motivating, similar to Hans Zimmer's score for Dunkirk a few years back. And one of the final pieces of music we hear in the film, A Light We Cannot See, beautifully draws the story to a close. I really couldn't have asked for much more out of this film from a musical standpoint. Although it doesn't reach the highs of the previous few installments, either as a film or from a musical perspective, when it hits, it really hits. And in the number 1 spot, I have the score for Andor Season 2. Was there ever any doubt? As you guys know, I loved the score for Andor Season 1, composed by Nicholas Britell. It was on my 2022 list, but I might bump it up in retrospect. This was one of my biggest concerns coming into 2025, because I learned that Brandon Roberts would be stepping in to compose the music for this season, as Britell was unable to return. And it took me a while to warm up to him. I wasn't even sure how I felt about his music after the first few episodes of the season. But I came around to love it, as Robert's musical vision of this story and the Star Wars galaxy began to unfold over the course of the season. Not only does he expand upon the musical ideas introduced by Britell in Season 1, but he introduces some of the best new themes we've heard in Star Wars for the past few years. The music for Gorman, which is very appropriately French-sounding, clearly influenced by the Renaissance period, and subsequent anthem for the Gore, performed by the immensely talented Grace Davidson, whose work I was familiar with on the Hobbit trilogy. I mean, how cool is that? She has serious bragging rights. Who else can say they have both The Hobbit and Star Wars on their resume? Come on, man. Even the Yavin theme, which is used sparingly yet appropriately as the season goes on, symbolizing the slow growth of the Rebel Alliance. And here's the thing. I'm not usually a fan of reused tracks, and this season has a lot of them. But they're implemented so well that I couldn't care less. Especially when it came to the reprisal of Eulogy, one of my favorite pieces of music from Season 1, which underscored Marva Andor's funeral speech in the very last episode. Hearing that piece again during Mon Mothma's speech to the Senate in Episode 9 of Season 2 was incredibly cathartic, beautifully drawing parallels between both these characters, the circumstances surrounding them, and their respective speeches. Even adding a bit of staccato in the bass line added that little bit of variety. And there's just one more thing I need to say. Past, present, future. This was not only designed as a reprisal of Britell's past-present suite from Andor Season 1, but it's also clearly an evolution of it, sounding more complete and fully orchestrated. Roberts is pulling from all the crucial musical ingredients that have defined this story since its inception in order to draw it to a close. In a sense, reflecting the journey of Cassian Andor as a character, someone who started this series purposeless and undefined, now knows who he is as he ceaselessly marches towards his destiny. And with that said, that's pretty much it for my top 5 favorite musical scores of 2025. This list was actually considerably harder to form than the last few years, because I didn't think there were as many incredible musical scores this year as there have been since 2022. Now, that isn't to say that there weren't some absolute bangers. Andor Season 2 is a game-changing score, and has almost redefined the music of Star Wars in a similar way that the show has redefined the franchise in general. The other honorable mentions and spots on this list are certainly noteworthy, but nothing comes close to Andor, in my opinion. But you guys let me know, what are your favorite musical scores of 2025? Do you disagree with any of my placements on this list? Do you agree with any of them? Are there any fantastic musical scores that I neglected to mention? Just whatever your thoughts are, please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.